Welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper. Welcome everybody to Deep Drinks Podcast. This is going to be a good one. I'm very excited because Ben said the magic words, I'm drinking tonight. So I'm going to have more than one. So I'm like, awesome. I'm going to join you. So this is going to be a fun episode. Before we start, we'll be ferociously, I don't know if that's the right word, muting trolls in the chat. But welcome all good faith questions because we'll do a Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask your questions throughout. I have my mods ready to go. So make sure your questions don't sound bad faith because then we'll be muting you. Ben, so just to introduce Ben is a fourth year medical student, a trans man, and is currently in service with the United States military. Ben debunks pseudoscience and snake oil-esque nonsense on his YouTube channel. That is when he's not co-hosting one of the many call-in shows, which include Truth Wanted, the Transatlantic Call-In Show, Talk Heathen, The Line, and many more. Let's jump straight into it. Welcome, student Dr. Ben.
Hello, how's it going?
Very, very well. So I have a quick first question as we talk about what we're drinking. I've got a degree in marketing. When you become a full doctor, what's going to happen with your branding? Are you going to be Dr. Ben?
Yeah, I'm debating kind of in my head a couple name choices. We might be going Family Dr. Ben because I'm going into family medicine, and that makes me sound like a nice person. I mean, I am a nice person, but it gives me that,
Yeah,
kind of small town doctor type feel to the channel, and that might be what I want to do. But we'll see. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards at this point.
Family Dr. Ben. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Awesome. Well, what are we drinking?
We are drinking Manhattan today. So we had talked about lots of different options of things to go with. And I was going to go with an old fashioned initially, but somebody else was also going to be doing an old fashioned. And these are very similar drinks with, instead of the sugar used in an old fashioned, we have sweet vermouth in the Manhattan, which gives it a little bit more of some depth of flavor. So I figure, it's a great cocktail. It's simple. It's very balanced, and it's a great drink. If anyone out there also wants to join us in some Manhattans.
For sure. What is everyone else drinking? And also, you mentioned another drink that we didn't get around to. I couldn't find it in Australia. Like all of Australia, I had to order it online, and I left it too late, like an idiot. So I feel really bad. But it was like Aquavit or something. I had to. There's like a Norwegian spirit.
Yeah, Akavi.
Okay.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's kind of like vodka in that it's either potato based or grain based, and not a lot of flavor on its own, but it's flavored with spices like caraway and that kind of thing. I think caraway is like the most forward flavor, which makes it savory and really interesting. So we were gonna try to do that, but it is more difficult to find.
I screwed up. We'll have to have you, but if we have you back, we'll have to do it because I was so excited to try it and I was so bummed that I left it too late. And I was like, why didn't I order this? Even if I did order it, it takes about 2 weeks usually. Australia is a bit of an island. But yeah. So I wanted to start. I wanted to start this with a bit of fire. I wanted to start this getting some venom out because last night I in preparation for this actually because we titled this "What Is a Man?" I obviously watched Matt Walsh's amazing piece of sophistry. What is a woman? It was worse than I thought.
It's horrible.
And I just wanted to. Can we just sink our teeth into that just quickly? Because I know a lot of people watching this might be clicking just on the name. So let's talk about this. It was garbage. Like, it was like, I'm surprised so many people are like celebrating it. Because it truly, like, even if you take a minute to think, it just makes no sense. What are your thoughts on it, first of all?
Yeah, first of all, like my main point about this is that trans people that I know should not be watching this. It's pure vitriol. It's not even a documentary. It's just hate propaganda. And
Mm,
unless you are out there to debunk it specifically on a show or something, I don't think trans people need to watch it. It will do
mm,
more damage to a trans person than it's worth to really debunk for them. So like be careful if you're trans and wanting to watch it. It is hard. It is hard to watch. But also it takes some very uh bad arguments already and off like it seems to make them worse than they already were, which is hilarious because they're not going with any good arguments and it's all cherry picked. The experts, they even okay, I don't know if you were aware of how they picked the trans people to interview on
oh,
the
I can only
documentary.
imagine. Like,
They baited trans people, and
oh,
they
really?
gave the assumption that it was going to be a fair, honest inquiry
Oh, yeah,
of a question, and so they baited all of these trans people to appear on this show,
yeah,
and then just brought them in to trash them and to
yeah.
make fun of them
Make
on
them look.
screen.
Yeah, it's interesting because what is a woman? That question's actually really complicated.
Mhm,
It isn't if you've got like, you know, 4 brain cells or something, or like you're thinking about it from like a grade 2 level, like you're telling like your child, like, oh, that's a woman, that's a man, like, and pointing to 2 different
mhm,
people. But like the actual question's quite hard, right? Because like, and people answered it in the documentary, but he just let me just pull up something actually. Um, um, I think let me just. So there's something that the big thing that they always talk about is like transgender bathrooms, right? That's the big thing. They didn't talk
mhm.
too much about it in the documentary, but they always bring it up like it's some sort of like a like like trans people are going to be running around like checking out people in the bathroom and stuff like this.
Mhm.
But they don't ever consider like the flip side of it, right? So it's like, so you're telling me, so Matt is saying, I want to see this person in the woman's bathroom. I want to see my little girl go into a change room, and Buck Angel is here with his big tats,
Yep.
bald head, been trans for like 40 years. And he just like walks into the cubicle. Like that's the alternative
Right.
space. But they don't ever consider that as like it's like, I want to see this person when I go into a woman's change room or a men's change room, for the other way around. It's crazy.
In the bathroom thing, often it targets cis people more than it does trans people a lot of the time because you have a range of people and like you can be even assigned female at birth and have very different expressions and presentations and certain people's body features surprisingly overlap. Like there isn't this straight black and white, this is a masculine person, this is a feminine person, even with regard to biology. There's so much overlap. And you
Mhm,
have mostly when you target trans people in the bathrooms, you're targeting cis people too. A lot of
mhm.
cis women with more masculine facial features or broader shoulders or that are taller might be mistaken for a trans woman and they get kicked out. So now where are those people going to go? It's when you're targeting one group of people, you're not thinking about who else are you catching in this.
Yeah.
And it's clear that they want a very simple answer for something that absolutely is not simple. And like an analogy that Katie Montgomery uses, and I'm stealing this, but at least I'm giving her credit, is that one time on Transatlantic, she mentioned like if you were to try to answer the question, what is the definition of a woman? Like take another example of a chair. And can you think of a definition that includes all chairs and excludes all non chairs?
Yeah.
You really can't do it.
No, it's like, and you go, you could ask someone like, what is, I'm just asking you what a chair is. You use them every day. What's a chair? Like, and then the person's getting flustered and you're like, come on, like what, just tell me what a
Right,
chair
just tell
is.
me clearly what a chair is. Like,
Yeah.
oh, so it's a thing that you sat on. Oh, so if I sat on the table, does that make the table a chair? Or did I put my food on my chair? Does that make it a table? It's like
Yeah.
you can do this with almost anything. And so it's a dishonest argument to say, well, this is nebulous, therefore it's you're not answering my question. And you can even turn this back on them. Like I would love to sit down with Matt Walsh and say, what makes you a man? And see him
Oh,
stumble.
yeah. Because this is what I wanted to ask you. Like, if we can do like a game, like
Yeah.
let's use what we imagine Matt Walsh's idea of gender is. Let's just
Mm.
use that and let's try and work out, is Matt Walsh a man? Like, can we do it? Because like from my understanding, we'd need to see his genitals, right? Because his idea,
Yeah.
his concept, or his chromosomes
Well,
or
you'd
something. So
need, you'd need to have a combination, and you'd have to see their genitals, their external and internal. You'd also have to see their genotype. So, and you'd also, there's like, it's constantly moving the goalpost with what they determine to be your sex. And a lot of people have decided upon your gametes or your gamete potential. So we'd have to also see that he is able to produce sperm and that the sperm are functional. That's
so
what we'd have to see here. Or at least that he at one point had the potential to produce sperm.
so Ben Shapiro is his boss, right, at the Daily Wire. So he doesn't know, like Ben Shapiro, he doesn't know what. So Ben Shapiro could be girl boss, like girl boss,
Right.
Ben Shapiro, woo woo. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't know. He hasn't grabbed Ben Shapiro's salty little balls and gone, these look like natural balls to me. Like it's just,
Right.
he
You
doesn't
have
know.
to make
He's walking
assumptions.
around life, like in Matt's mind, he's walking around life not knowing who. Like I don't know who's who. Like that could be a man or a woman. That could, like my wife. Like he found out on his wedding night whether or not what gender his wife was. Like come on, like it's so silly.
Yeah, even they rely on self ID, and their whole argument is anti self ID. Well, you can't just declare what you are, but that's what you do every day. Like if I walked into you on the street, odds are I would refer to you as male, and I would use male pronouns for you without even thinking about it. And it, like I'm taking you at your presentation for it. I'm not looking at your karyotype. I don't know your exact biology. And if you said, "Yeah, I'm a man," like I would have no problem agreeing with you there. So why is it so much of a problem that I present in public and the same things that you wouldn't see from you wouldn't see from me because I'm not showing you anything in public? How come we can take David's word but not mine in public for and you're going to assume I'm male anyway. They already do assume that I'm male. So I'm not even asking you, like, at least for me, I'm not asking you to abandon your assumptions. A lot of trans people, like, the way that we're going in this conversation is, yes, we want to be more inclusive, and that's why we're using pronouns, and that's why we're asking, is because the assumption isn't always right. So that's all we're doing, is just saying, like, if you have a masculine presenting cis woman and you say, "How are you doing, sir?" and she says, "Actually, it's ma'am," but they're not trans, that's okay. They would apologize and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am," and move on. But if this was a trans person, it's all of a sudden, why do you get to define yourself as a woman? Like, but you're doing the same exact thing.
I know, and
So
it's like I don't know what this like. I don't know what this thing is about, like being the arbiters of truth, where you're like, show me your genitals. Like I want to like know what you like were born as. Like I just don't like. He said on when he was on Dr. Phil, gender is a linguistic term. You can have whatever self perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self perception. But like his name is Matthew Walsh. He asks people to call him Matt. Like his
yeah,
like birth certificate name, I call him Matt Walsh because that's how he wants to be known in the world. Is it so
right.
hard to be like, yo, dude, like I'm actually a woman, and you're like, oh, okay, ma'am. Like, is that so hard? Like, I just don't see why it's such like a big issue. You know, it's just it's nuts. and for most of it, like unfortunately, because I don't personally have to deal with this, like the constant need to kind of defend my identity, like I'm sure yourself and most trans people have to constantly go through. So when I was watching the show, it was a mixture of like anger at just how stupid the arguments were and laughter at like the insanity that I was seeing. I wasn't necessarily like emotional about it. I didn't actually consider that, you know, a trans person watching this might be quite harmed by what they're hearing. But one part did get to me. One part got to me. I paused the documentary and I went looking. There was that that person, the trans man that was on, and they said there have been studies that say transitioning helps mental health. They have all been retracted.
That's not true.
Oh, it's so not true.
That's not true. And also it's funny when they bring in these grifters like that trans man in that video, or people like Buck Angel or Blair White, or any of those trans people that have decided to side with the transphobes. And there's some interesting points.
I brought him up for that reason, by the way. I knew he was part of the
and like he didn't transition as a kid, and they, in the documentary, they're using him to say this is why you shouldn't mutilate children, which that's a big piece of misinformation, because we are not doing genital surgeries on children. We do not do that. In fact, the people that want to do genital surgeries on children are the ones advocating for assigning intersex kids to sex before they're of the age of consent. So it's actually their side that is doing the unnecessary harm to children. We are not advocating for that in any way, but they're saying, like, look at this person's forearm scar from his phalloplasty. We shouldn't be doing this to kids. We're not. He transitioned like in his 40s. So he made that conscious decision as an adult to do that. And you have every right to do that. And you have every right as well to detransition. And there's an important point with people who, there are about 2% on average, is what we're seeing from the studies, of people who want to detransition, or who decide that transition was not right for them. And we don't disown these people. I think the detransitioners are evidence that gender dysphoria is a real thing. You have people who maybe it wasn't the right move for them, and they got dysphoric from transitioning, which only shows that there is some part of you that has a sense of gender, and that you want to be comfortable with yourself. And most of the trans community will happily accept you as a detransitioner, as long as, you know, you're saying that this is my detransition, but there are other trans people that do not regret their transition. But you get certain people like this one guy, and there's another one on Twitter not too long ago, who you look into their story and they go on this, well, I transitioned and it sucked, I hate it, and then they make no effort to detransition. None. Yeah. Like, and they even, one of them even said, like, I'm very happy living as a man, but I just don't want to make people uncomfortable and stuff. And it's like, so it's a social thing, and you don't want to detransition. You just say you enjoy living as a man. So maybe this is right for you, and you're just trying to get sympathy from people. And it turned out that this person on Twitter, it was complaining about being bald after starting T, which, looking into the story, he had a history of PCOS, which he was already going bald before T. So you start looking into the details, and a lot of these people that are grifters are not communicating the whole story. And if you had all of the information, you can't really use them as examples in favor of the transphobes. They actually give more information as to why we need to take care of people better and be more inclusive. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that guy, the specific on the video.
So when he said that, I was like, okay, like this is a new documentary. I'll look up the studies. Like I'll look up this, because, you know, I'm familiar with, we might talk about vaccines later. I'm familiar with Andrew Wakefield's 1998 Lancet paper, and it's still there. Like, the Illuminati aren't hiding it. It just has a big retracted stamp across it, right? And like, you can still look at it. But it's like, it's obvious that it's retracted. I looked for these retracted studies that he spoke about. I couldn't find any, given I didn't go through every medical journal. But what I did find was on cornell.edu, I found a systematic review, and I'll just read it here. We conducted a systematic literature review of all peer-reviewed articles published in English between 1991 and June 2017 that assesses the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being. We identified 55 studies that consist of primary research on this topic, of which 51, so 93%, found that gender transition improves the overall well-being of transgender people, while 4, 7%, reported mixed or null findings. We found no studies concluding that gender transition caused overall harm. And this is all just there. Like, and to me, the fact that Matt Walsh just decided to leave that point in the documentary, but didn't fact check it, well, he probably did. He has to be a bad faith actor at this point.
Absolutely.
There's no way that he can be like, I'm making an honest documentary, and then doesn't look up. Like, it took me 5 minutes to find this quote and to see all the studies listed, and I clicked and I opened the first line of studies to check that they weren't retracted. They were all there, and the findings were all there. It was all up to date. Like, it blew me away.
Yeah, there's one study that they like to cite frequently, which does not say what they think it does. They use it to say that gender-affirming surgery, or people that undergo gender-affirming surgery, have higher rates of suicidality and mental health issues. But actually, what the study said, it was not comparing trans people pre-surgery to trans people post-surgery. It compared trans people with cis people. So yeah, we know that trans people have higher rates of suicidality and mental health issues,
Of course,
usually related to societal treatment of trans people and lack of access to care in other facilities. But you can't cite that and say that this is about post-op trans people when this is about post-op trans people compared to their cis counterparts that never had gender dysphoria to begin with. Or those other studies that show one of the studies that they try to use to show regret rates for trans people included gender non-conforming kids. So even if you had a boy that identified as a boy and played with dolls or did some feminine activity, they would be labeled as gender non-conforming and thus included in the trans group for the study. So many of those people would not be included. They would not meet inclusion criteria for study on trans people. So they're citing studies that have obvious flaws to them, and it's very easy to debunk these points because of that.
And it leads often these talking points lead straight to the conclusion that the progressive side is pointing to. Like, we should be more inclusive. We should, be respectful of trans. Like, if trans people have a high rate of suicide, it's like, well, let's do everything we can to stop them from killing themselves. Like this, but that's not the conclusion they arrive at. They arrive at some wacko, like otherworldly conclusion. It's bizarre. Or like the other one, I just want to mention the twin study, which had a botched circumcision, and so a doctor convinced the parents to raise the botched child twin. Sorry, there were two twins as a woman, as a girl, and quote, they could and he says this like it's a point. They could never accept their gender. It's like, because their gender was male.
It's evidence in favor of our point that you have some innate gender identity that even if you take somebody and change their genitals, it does not change what's in their brain. So the points that they think are proving their points are not. They're proving our points. That gender dysphoria is a real thing. and that
Yeah.
conversion therapy doesn't work, because that's what essentially you did to that kid. Like, you forcibly assigned that kid and then used conversion therapy on him, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So
It's
how's that
amazing.
going to work on anybody else?
Yeah. The whole thing is just a big, like, it's one of my favorite, it's one of my, when I'm debating someone who's a bad faith actor, I turn off the good faith as well. I'll usually meet them where they are, and
Yeah.
I'll throw the burden of proof back on them the whole time. Burden of proof. Just I'll never take anything. I'm giving away my secrets here. But that's essentially what the documentary is him just going like, it's so funny too, because I recorded myself watching it. I won't release it anywhere, I don't think. But he says something like, you know, these people don't have all the answers, so I'm going to go to a university. And I paused and I was like, they're going to find the most like feminist, blue-haired, like, you know, professor that they can in the world. Sure enough, next, like, press play, blue-haired, like, gender study. It's like, of course, like, they're not finding, I think they probably did like 100 times more interviews, and they just like whittled it down to the people that they could make look like they had the most extreme position on one side. And then he comes in as like I just like to go fishing, you know, I just a normal man. I wear flannelette shirts, I tuck them in, and I'm just trying to work out what's going on. It's like, no, you're not. You're a bad faith actor.
Also, like, why is your opinion of someone who's never studied sociology or psychology or medicine or any of these fields that are relevant to the conversation, why is your perspective given equal platforming to a doctor of sociology and gender studies? Like, why are these there? Obviously, these two opinions are not equal. And I hate that the desire of society and like, as one of the downsides of having a democratic republic where people view their opinions as being equal because they have an equal vote. Like, no, your opinion is not equally valid to somebody that has studied this in depth and has learned the nuance of the conversation. Like, they want this to be a nuance-free conversation. And this is the same argumentation that we see from theists on a lot of these shows that I'm on, and all over Twitter. They want things to be a conversation devoid of nuance. And like, if you get into a debate with somebody about creationism, oftentimes the theist will go to but it's just much more simple to think this way. It's like, but simplicity is not, like, because the argument is simple does not mean that it's true. And I think that that's a similar argumentation point that they use here, is that, well, our definition is simple and so it's true. Like, no, it's devoid of nuance. And like, they'll say, well, but basic biology. Well, basic biology is only okay until it's overturned by advanced biology. Like, if you haven't understood the advanced biology,
true.
Then
I didn't even consider
like,
that.
Basic biology is so dumbed down to a point where, like, it's for beginners. You start off with the beginning until you can learn to recognize the nuance and understand the more in-depth process. Like, you take this with any field of study at all. You take a high school course on it, like, yeah, okay, you're getting a very watered down version, but that's appropriate if you're a 15-year-old kid. You go to college, you study the same thing. It's a little bit more in depth, but still not quite there. You get a master's degree, you add some more, like, okay, now you're starting to feel stupid because it's a lot more difficult than you thought it was. And then you enter a doctorate program, it's even worse. And then you go in your field and it's the same. It just gets more and more in depth, and you learn what misinformation you had yesterday is false. And so they're stuck at the college level biology, like the gen bio level biology, and saying,
they're not even
well,
there. They're still in like
even
grade
there.
3. They're still in
grade
like
3 biology. Like, but basic biology. Well, but hold on. The advanced biology disagrees with you. So you can claim your basic biology, but your basic biology is wrong. And that's just a fact. Like, it's not like I'm expecting everybody to go get a doctorate. I'm not saying that. But if you're not looking into that level of detail, then you can't be the arbiter in what's true and not. And I'm not saying either that a doctorate is going to be the arbiter, because they're all constantly arguing with each other about their field of study. And that's why we have peer review. But it's just, the Dunning-Kruger effect is so real and so incredibly frustrating.
But what gets me about the whole thing is like he's masquerading as he's trying to get to the truth, and he's masquerading as like, science told me that a male is this. Like he's masquerading as like he's trying to be scientific, and he does this big ass straw man when he's talking to that is a gender studies professor or the pediatric professor.
Yeah.
And she says something like, Santa is real for my children. And then he's like, yeah, but Santa isn't real. And then like, we know Santa is real for my children. And then he takes that straw man, and he straw mans this entire argument.
Yeah.
Like, what is a woman? And then like he goes and interviews a bunch of people, but it's like, the irony was like slapping me in the face about like his position starts with the God belief that he has no evidence for, zero. Like if he had any evidence, it would be studied at universities and in like a form of like epistemology, not just like theology. No evidence for, takes it on faith, and then masquerades as if like he's not doing the same thing that children do with Santa. Like my truth, your truth. Right. He's like, no, there just is truth. Where's your truth on the God claim? Like just, and then like if you put like if I could lock him in a little black room with me, like a little room with one little light bulb, and we could sit there and we weren't leaving until we agreed on terms. I think that he would have to he would retreat to faith when you pressed him on his God belief. Like he wouldn't have an answer. And it's like, you're doing the same thing. And like the irony just like, it made me so happy and angry at the same time. It was amazing. Like I just, the feelings, like the right always talks about triggered lefties. I was a triggered lefty, but in the best way possible when I was watching that. It was amazing. Yes, I could go on about ranting about Matt Walsh this whole time, but yeah, his documentary, could you sum it up in one word? What would you say if you summed it up in one word?
Bad. That's like, I don't need a whole lot of fancy words. Like I could just say it's bad.
Yeah, I think I'd actually disagree with you. I think it's really good in like the way it's presented and stuff. I just think if you take a proper look at it, it is I would agree, it's very bad. I think the problem is it's actually really good. Like, Joe Rogan's
the filmmaking is done well. Like it's good for a propaganda piece.
Yeah.
Like in functioning as propaganda, they do a good job doing the propaganda. So I will give you that. Yeah. But in terms of being factual,
I'm sure Mein Kampf was beautifully written. Like, Mein Kampf was perfect. Yeah, but it's not good. Yeah, I'd say garbage. Like garbage points. I'd have to use 2 words. But that's enough about Matt Walsh. And I will use his preferred name because we're inclusive here.
Because we're nice.
Yeah, because we're nice. So I did want to get into your story, obviously. So you grew up religious, and now, and you're a trans man. So I'm sure that's a wild story. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I'm actually kind of like a minister's kid. So not like a full-on pastor, I guess, but in the US, we have a lot of these college ministries, like these Bible study youth groups that happen on college campuses. And I mean, their main goal is to basically convert college kids to whatever religion. And so my parents work for one of those. So I've been around the church forever, like in an organizational sense. And I was one of those kids. This is actually interesting because even from being very young, like I never evaluated the claims of Christianity because I was afraid of hell. Like I was afraid of hell, like even since I was really little. And throughout like my childhood, they'd have like these altar calls and stuff. And while I had like accepted Jesus at a very young age, I still felt the need to reaccept multiple times because I didn't know if my first time was good enough, and I didn't want to go to hell because I didn't do well enough the first time, or I wasn't sincere enough the first time. And all of that like really really hit me hard. I grew up with a lot of feelings of shame and guilt, and I've never felt good about myself. And I just kind of accepted everything on face value from what people were telling me, just based on that fear aspect. So I thought, going into college, like, I was this super academic person. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna study apologetics, and we're gonna, like, and I was a theater major for the first part of college before switching to biology, because that was actually a fun story in that I basically believed that uh, you had certain talents and they were God given to you, and God had your destiny set for you, and that's what you're going to do. And I was raised in
Oh
the theater.
no.
So, like, my dad's a minister and my mom's the theater director. So,
Oh, that's the
being in the
classic.
theater since age 5, I was like, yeah, I've been gifted in theater. I'm going to go do acting, and that's my lot in life. And then it turns out in college, I realized that it's a choice. Like, people that went into medicine chose that. Like, they're not any more special than me. Like,
Yeah.
God didn't give them this particular path. Like, they made a choice and they went for it. And I said, hey, I could do that too. I can also make that choice. And so I changed my major to biology, and it's amazing how long I held on to theism throughout that, because I had no good reasons for it. And every time I went to a pastor or somebody with the same concerns, it was always like, hey, this argument isn't really a good argument. Like, where, and especially with regard to how they chose books of the Bible and things, like, what made these books legitimate and these ones not? Like, we don't like the Catholics, obviously, but like, what makes the Apocrypha something that we don't do, but they do? And no good answers coming for why we chose what books we did, and why we believe what we do. And it gave me questions. And then their stance on gay people and trans people, and I was very closeted at the time, like, wasn't even really aware of myself at the time, just because I wasn't allowed to be. I didn't know we were a thing. um but as I kept going through my biology degree, I came to more questions. And number one was, human evolution is not at all what the church had claimed it was. Like, so they're already wrong on one point. Like, so what else are they wrong about? And just as I discovered more about the world, and discovered how unwilling these people were to accept what was clearly science, like, I'd moved from, like, young earth creationist to evolutionary theist to, like, and at that point too, like, my anti-vax beliefs were challenged as well, because my family's also very anti-vax. And so
Hey,
that was
welcome to the pod.
challenged. I found out that, hey, there's no good evidence to demonstrate harm of vaccines. So I abandoned that belief. And as I was just, going through each of these claims, I eventually ended up at watching AXP and other shows, and I was like, this isn't true. And
The
there's
spirit,
no way that I can go back
Matt
to believing something that I'm not convinced is true.
Matt
So,
Dillahunty's evil spirit got you. He got Tate Hoskins. He got you. He got myself. It's
yeah.
just start watching the Atheist Experience, and that's what happens. Did it's a joke, by the way, everyone.
No, it's
Did
it's funny too, because my family, I'm sure by now that they know I'm a host of Talk Heathen, because, like, it's hard to hide anything
yeah.
that's on the internet from your family. Um,
Mm.
so I'm sure that they're aware. They're aware that I'm an atheist. I was kind of forced to come out to them as an atheist, in that when I was still in college, they kind of gave me, like, an intervention of, like, you're gonna go to church or else. And I was like, I had to come out at that point, like, hey, I don't believe this shit, and that's why I'm not going to church anymore. But so they know I'm an atheist, but, like, it'd be funny if they knew the fact that, like, they had raised me to be this very religious person, and now I'm hosting, like, the second biggest atheist call-in show on the internet. But that's a different point. They'll find out soon enough, and maybe they'll call
So
in. I don't know.
What kind of I have to know. I'm taking some guesses, but what kind of Christian were you?
Evangelical.
Yeah, okay. So usually,
Yeah.
like, there's evangelical because we don't really have evangelicals in Australia.
Mhm.
They're like more Pentecostals, I guess.
Yeah, we weren't that far. All the churches I went to were non-denominational. So
Okay.
yeah, just kind of
Was there like worship, sometimes prayer flags, like not prayer
yeah.
flag, worship flags, like speaking in tongues, that kind of thing?
We didn't have any of that. We didn't have any of the speaking in
Okay.
tongues, like none of the weird stuff. But it
Mm.
was just, like we were one of those churches though that like had the rock band for worship,
Yeah,
and like it
yeah.
was very contemporary to try to keep you there, and like
Yeah.
very you couldn't really define them as being a specific denomination,
Mm,
but it's clearly Protestant, of the Protestant variety, and the like didn't have a whole lot of polarizing views in terms of what branch of Protestantism. So
mm. Yeah, right. So, so you came out to your family as atheist. I remember seeing a show with you a year ago or so, where they didn't know that you were trans yet, because you're only recently
yeah.
trans, right? Like over the last few years.
Yeah,
Um,
I started transition after my first year of med school. So I did a whole year of medical school before transitioning, and I came out to them a year ago in December.
wow. Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about how that went?
It was bad. It was a bad
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah. I
But
imagine.
I don't regret it still, because I'm much happier knowing that they know and I don't have to hide anything. Like, they don't approve at all. And they said some
Mm,
very horrible things to me, which I'm not going to say here because they're very horrible things.
mhm,
But and it all came down to like they don't want me forcing my lack of religious views on them. Like, okay, calm the fuck down. That's not what I'm doing. And like calling somebody
mm,
by their preferred name and pronouns is not forcing you to abandon your religious beliefs. Like, calm down.
yeah.
And yeah, they're taking a like martyr stance that they don't deserve at all for that. But it's
Oh, the old.
yeah.
They're just like sorry to. So first of all, for those who don't
Mhm.
know this show, we have deep conversations over deep drinks. I invite Christians on. I like Christians. I invite Hare Krishnas on. I invite everyone. This isn't just an atheist calling show. So excuse me as I rant just for a second about Christians, but they have this like intense persecution complex. I find a lot of the time. Some don't, but some definitely do. And it's like it's like I remember when same-sex marriage, the plebiscite was coming around Australia, and everyone was voting on the right on whether or not like members of the LGBT community could have human rights and be able to get married. Um, they they were like they thought it was persecution on them somehow, and I
Yeah.
still couldn't. I was like because God instituted marriage, so it's like so it will never be between a man and a man and a woman and a woman. I'm like okay, but I'm like okay, so great. So like that doesn't matter then if they are considered by law because you wouldn't consider them as married. So that's fine, right? And he's like, "Oh, well, I still won't vote on it." I was like, "But wait, what?" Like I'm
Like,
so
your
confused.
church
Like,
can still
yeah,
deny a religious marriage for them. Like, that's
yeah,
fi like, do whatever you want in your religion, but don't l take away all of my options with the
yeah.
court. Like, if
Or
I have
like
to get a court marriage, like, so be it, but, like, maybe I don't wanna get married in your church anyway.
yeah. Or I asked
But
them like, wait, so can atheists get married? Can Satanists get married if it's ordained by God? Like is it only a Christian thing, or like are they not considered married because they're not through the eyes of God, or like like what? Or can a Hindu couple get married? And like I remember asking just asking like, okay, so let's say a gay couple get married, is it more of a sin for them to stay married or get divorced? Because like divorce is a sin,
mhm,
and like like brain does not compute, and like it's like
yeah,
they can so it just amazes me. Or like I had a family member, a friend's mother walk past like a poster in an airport that said like love is love, Virgin Australia or something, and they're like, does this have to be shoved in our throat every second of every day? And it's just like, wow, like it's like that. It's not. It's just that like it's just there.
and it's funny for me, like, funny not in a haha funny, but, like, a bad
Yeah.
funny. Like, you're going to take this persecution complex and be like, you're interfering on my right to be Christian. It's like, think about this. Like, you have a trans person talking to you. Like, if we were and I'm not saying that you should necessarily compare your miseries to somebody else, because like that's kind of meaningless. But in this particular case, like, you have a trans person. Have you, as a Christian in the United States, have you ever been given a death threat? Have you ever been denied healthcare? Have you ever been denied bathroom use? Have you ever been called a slur for who you are? Like, you compare these things, like you're saying that you're being persecuted because someone asked you to use a certain name and pronouns for them. Like, I get harassed on a daily basis. Like, I get death threats. I get people saying, why don't you kill yourself? Like, so if you're going to play that card, why are you playing that card when you haven't experienced any of these things in the face of somebody who does? Like, yeah, you are the persecuted one here when we're the ones actively fighting for our rights to exist in, like, the state of Florida and the state of Texas. Like, and this is not an exaggeration, want to get rid of trans people. They want to exterminate trans people by whatever means they can, whether it be they go into hiding and never come out of the closet, or they end themselves. They don't care. They don't want trans people to exist in that state. Or if they leave, or if people leave the state of Florida because they're trans, they don't care by what means, but they don't want us there. So, like, you cannot compare these experiences, and it's an absolute slap in the face for anybody that says, like, who is not part of an actual, like, oppressed group of people, who is in fact the majority in the country still for now, to say, yeah, well, but you're not letting me call you a slur, so I'm persecuted.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like
no.
society's like, hey, we've noticed that you've got this like giant stick and you've been hitting people with this stick for like a long time. We're gonna remove that stick, and they're like, how dare you take away my stick? I
Right?
loved hitting people with, like, I'm persecuted. No, you're not persecuted. Society's just taking away the big stick you've been whacking everyone with. Like, yeah. Did you did you I'm just trying to think of where to of which oh, that's right, that's what I wanted to ask you. So one of my Discord friends, they're like a philosophy major, and they're probably going to go on to do some other stuff as well. Every time I have like deep questions, especially about morality, I'll like call them up and talk to them about them. So they had this question, and so I know it's a good faith question, but I think it could be like a good place to kind of explore more of the topic. So what is gender, and how does it differentiate from sex?
Yeah, so this is definitely an interesting conversation, and I'm going to add a third term in here. So we'll talk about sex, we'll talk about gender, and we'll talk about gender identity, because there's slightly different things. So sex, and I disagree with a lot of the gender criticals or the transphobes out there about what sex means. A lot of people will say that sex is, yeah.
I just wanted to interrupt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and push back a little bit through this conversation, not because I disagree with you, but because I want to push the buttons to see what kind of falls out, what we can kind of. I'm with you in this conversation. I'm just
and because people face this discussion and how
Yeah.
to approach this kind of discussion in public. So with sex, the way I see it is a combination of biological factors. So while a lot of people might rely on one keystone biological factor, I disagree with that, because it is the combination that produces the result, and one factor in itself does not produce the result. So people might say it's external anatomy, but the problem there is that some people can have external anatomy that does not align with internal anatomy. So like the penis or the vagina is a separate entity from the testes and the ovaries, and the uterus and the prostate and all that, they come from different chemical pathways that trigger those. So you can have somebody with both male and female external anatomy, or both male and female internal anatomy, or somebody who has male external anatomy and female internal anatomy, like they might have a penis and a uterus. So I differentiate those two aspects of anatomy. There's also hormonal sex, which is the hormones that you produce, whether it's testosterone dominant or estrogen dominant. And then your genetics, which would be either XX, XY, XXY, XYY, any of those combinations, usually related to the SRY gene, which can translocate. So SRY is the testis determining factor, which causes the testis to develop, which usually in someone who has all of their sexual characteristics congruent, SRY would make a biological male. But sometimes that SRY gene translocates to the X chromosome. So you can have somebody who is XX that presents with a completely male anatomy and hormone presentation. So that's why, since there's so much variability, this is why I determine it to be a combination of factors, which then also accounts for the spectrum of sex.
Yeah. So like,
yeah.
What's that term? I always forget what it is. It's like people who are born with, like, they're not like, there's like a bunch of characteristics that make up like male or female, and then there's someone there's like intersex.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So am I correct in assuming that, like, I've heard that there are like 16 characteristics. This is old though. This is old news, so it might be wrong. But 16 characteristics that make up biological male or biological female in human adults, like roughly, well, probably not roughly, but let's just say 16, because maybe forgot the real number, but
it's close.
16.
It's close.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's like, hormones, XY chromosomes, like genitals, internal genitals, things like that. And there are for someone to be intersex means that one of those things doesn't align. And if you use that categorization, there are more people who are intersex than people who have red hair. So there's like now, given you wouldn't be able to tell for the majority of intersex people, so it's not like there are like people with two different genitals and stuff running around, more than redhead people, but along this grouping of things, like by definition they would be intersex. Is that right?
Yeah. So people with Klinefelter, for example, who are XXY chromosomes, so they are both XX and XY, they typically present as phenotypic males. So their external anatomy is all male, their internal anatomy is all male. The difference is a lot of people with Klinefelter do not know they have Klinefelter until puberty or until they get a fertility test, because many of them are not fertile. So like you can go almost your entire life without knowing you have something like this, and it just pops up incidentally. So that's why I say it's a combination. And that's where I would disagree with a lot of people that say that, like, people say that there's a keystone factor that determines, like, they might say SRY is the key factor that makes you male or female. Well, no, but because you can have SRY and still be have some anatomical difference that makes you testosterone dominant or estrogen dominant when you wouldn't be otherwise. There's a whole lot of factors that play into this. So I'm not willing to give them one factor. It's multifactorial, as is most everything that happens to a human body. Is there's almost never one factor that determines an outcome. It's multiple factors. So that's why I think instead of saying that there's one primary factor, that we give credit to all of the factors that contribute. So that's sex.
Right.
I don't know if you have any more questions or thoughts on that particular definition.
No. So I understand biological sex. And then I'm sure we're going to go in now into gender, but I guess a first question I have about that is biological sex usually connected to gender, or not?
For the majority of people, yes.
Okay. So what is gender?
So gender is the societal. It's the way that you interact with society according to a certain gender identity. So we'll get into gender identity in a little bit, but gender is where you get the roles, the stereotypes, the social norms, and this can change depending on society. So you'll know, like in biblical times, men and women wore things that look like dresses. A lot of them wore similar things, and so while a dress today might seem taboo for a man to wear, in other cultures that might be deemed to be masculine. So it is more nebulous and it is more flexible based on culture, but that's the whole point. It's we've moved from sex, which is biology. This is now sociology. So it is how you engage with the society around you according to your gender identity. So do you have any questions on that? Because I know it's more nebulous.
Well, I guess might be a big one, so we might save it. But do you think, like, so you're obviously trans, but do you think if you grew up, and this is a whack hypothetical, but this is what we do on Deep Drinks. Maybe pour yourself another drink.
Okay.
If you grew up in a vacuum, meaning you had no outside influence, like you were just in this perfectly white room, like the Matrix or something, right? Do you think you would have gender dysphoria, or did you have gender dysphoria, or do you think you'd be trans, or do you think you could just express yourself however?
Yeah, I don't know, and that's interesting because I think I would have my preferences and my expression, but I don't think it would be as tied to gender because there would be a concept of gender. If there's no concept of gender, I would just express myself in the way that I want to. And I'd maybe say, yeah, these pronouns sound like something that I like the word of, or this outfit is something that I like, or this is how I want my hair to look. This is the name that I like. And I might end up the same kind of person, but it might also be different because the way that I present myself right now is with the fact that I grew up in American society in like the late 90s and 2000s. And so my engagement with society is rooted partially in the culture that I grew up in. And that's part of any sociological concept.
Right. So would you, how do you feel about this is all, we're going to come back to gender, but this is tangential. How do you feel about gender abolitionists, or people who just think, we should just remove the idea of gender? Men can wear dresses, women can, I don't know.
So it's an interesting thing to think about because I think it would work in a society that already doesn't have thoughts about gender culturally, because I really don't see a problem with just taking away gender at all and just you being you. Like I think that's great. In terms of like
norms,
but then in terms of expression, like, because gender expression is separate from your gender identity, so you can have any gender identity and still express yourself in a completely different way that's not congruent with your gender identity. So I think it would be difficult to implement something like that in a society that has already established cultural norms surrounding gender. But if you took a society of people who all agreed to abandon cultural gender norms, like, I wouldn't be opposed to that, honestly. Like I think that'd be fine.
It could be fun. It could be like a fun a fun society. Right. Okay. So I don't have any other questions on that tangent. Do you want to circle back to what you're talking about with gender and gender identity?
Yeah. So gender and gender identity are different in that. So if we divide them all up by field, so we had sex is biology, gender is sociology, and gender identity is psychology. So this is how you view yourself. This is your self-awareness, your self-actualization, just your view of yourself. And this is where it gets very, very nebulous, because everybody's self is different, and it's very difficult to define the self. And psychologists have been trying to do this as long as psychology has been a thing, and even as long as philosophy has been a thing. People have been trying to define the self. What is the self? And like something that, at least with utility to society, because in terms of, like, if I were just to mentally masturbate on what is myself, I could be here for eternity without having an answer. And some people love to think about that. I don't. I like utility. So viewing this from a perspective of utility, my perception of myself is that I see myself as masculine. I see myself as a man. And that, for me, is going to align with wanting to be seen in society as a man. So this is where gender identity ties back in to gender. So my sense of self wants to be seen as that self by other people in the community. So in doing that, what like, let's take two equal things. Like, and this is actually how one tool that I use to decide what my own gender was. I like Vikings. Vikings are cool. A lot of people like Vikings. So I took example of two Vikings. One had the body of a man, the other had a body of a woman. And you cannot argue at all that one Viking is more strong than the other one. They're equal in their strength, in their capabilities. All that's the same.
Yeah.
The only difference is what they look like and how they interact with society. One's a he, him, one's a she, her. One abides by some more masculine norms, one abides by feminine norms, and those can even be flexible. But for me, it was like, if I could have the choice between these two people, these two almost identical people, I pick the one in the male body every time.
Yeah.
That's how I see myself. And somebody else might see them in the female body. And so it's the biology that I have does not align with the biology that my psychological self sees, which causes a disconnect. So while it's very difficult to define what a psychological gender identity is, you can pretty easily think about it in terms of examples in the real world of, like, and even for an example, like, this is taking something that is more stereotypically feminine. Like, there's certain things in my life that are feminine that I enjoy doing. Like, I was a cheerleader in high school when I presented as a woman, and I enjoyed it. It was a great sport. It's fun. I liked performing. I liked dancing, but I always wanted to be a male cheerleader. They do kind of the same thing. Like, they're both cheerleaders. They're both doing something very feminine with regard to society. So expression is kind of irrelevant there.
Yeah.
But one's a man, one's a woman. Which one do I want to be doing the same exact thing? I want to be the man. Okay. I think it's solidified for me where I fall on this. And I guess, like, everyone in the audience, if you want to think about two identical scenarios and which one you'd choose, maybe it tells you a little bit more about yourself. But I know there's a little bit of a rant, but
no, great rant. And we always love a good rant here. Usually it's me though. So I appreciate it. But something that stood out to me is something that I remembered, was when I was younger, I used to play Skyrim. I still play video games all the time, but I used to play Skyrim, which is an Elder Scrolls game. And my younger brother, he used to always choose, well, he didn't always, but he would sometimes choose to play as a lady. Like, he'd build a lady character and play it, and I'd watch him. And I always be like, why? Like, this is so confusing. Like, it made me angry. I was like, I don't understand why. But for him, he's not trans or anything. But for him, he was watching, it appeared as if he was watching someone else's story. Like, he was watching a female play a game, right? Where for me, when I played Skyrim, I was that character. Like I made choices that in that game. I never joined the Dark Brotherhood. I was always like the good knight in the game. You know, like I always did certain things. And so I couldn't relate to my brother choosing like the girl because I was like, but how do you relate? Because we're viewing the game differently. But it's just interesting that well, I've learned to since be able to play as a girl character. I'm not weird, but I am weird, but at the time it's funny because like it felt really funny to me to put myself into the position of a gender that I didn't align with, and to pretend that I was another gender. That didn't feel like it just felt like I would rather just be the other I'd rather just be the male gender. And I'm sure for you, like I don't know if you ever played video games, but like
this is a great story actually,
okay,
because this was pre-transition me, like back in high school into college, where like I would play these MMORPGs, and there were times when I learned like as a kid that people on the internet don't know what you look like. They don't know who you are. You're in a chat bar on the side. They don't know.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I can play with my identity in this space where nobody knows any different. And so I would play as male characters, and I would engage in chats saying I was a guy. Nobody questioned anything. And then I would leave the game and say, if only that could be real life. And for some reason, I never grasped that I was trans. Like it never clicked for me that like maybe that was who I was, and that I was only had this safe space in the video game to be who I was. And then because I had times where I would play as a female character because I felt I was obligated to. I didn't want to. I felt like I was obligated to. And so gender dysphoria like displays, like as you saw there, like with you in the video game character, that's gender dysphoria. Like you experienced that.
Really? I never considered that. I that feels almost like it feels almost like offensive to people who actually go through like horrible.
Well, no, it's accurate. You in trying to experience another gender that wasn't you, and feeling uncomfortable with representing yourself as that gender, that's dysphoria, and that's valid. And like part of our argument here too, like in inclusion of trans people, is acknowledging that cis people, if I were to take a cis person and reassign them or have them go through conversion therapy, they would probably get gender dysphoria. The majority of them would.
Just like that twin study, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, you know, I know that both of those twins died, and I think one of them died of suicide. I think the transitioned one, which was horrible. It's just I just wish society. This is going to sound a bit hippie, but I just wish the society would just like, we could just like, I don't know, just accept people for, I guess, who they are. Yeah.
There's an analogy that, again, crediting Katie Montgomery because she has been in this debate space a lot longer than I have.
I love Katie, by the way. I haven't like watched a whole lot of her stuff, but every time I do see her, I'm like, she's a badass.
Yeah. There's this one analogy that she gives that is really solid, and it's trying to help cis people understand what gender dysphoria feels like to a trans person, especially a trans person who doesn't know that they're trans. Because many of us go years without even batting an eye at the fact that we might be trans. But imagine you have two people next to each other, and they're both on like some wheel, or they're on a wall, or like imagine like a medieval torture device where one person is strapped right side up and the person next to them is strapped upside down. And but they've always been like that. They don't know anything different than the way that they've been. Like from birth, they've been in this position. And the person that's upside down says, you know, I think something's not right. And I don't know what it is, but something's not right here. And the person next to them who's right side up says, no, I don't see a problem. Like, this is fine. Well, like, of course you think it's fine because you're in the right position and you have been the whole time. But to somebody who's upside down and they don't know they're upside down, like, it's hard to communicate what exactly is wrong if you've never experienced anything beyond that. But like for that person, it's upside down. And that's the same way for trans people. Like for us, we feel upside down and we can't always articulate why we feel upside down. But it's not helpful for someone who's not upside down to tell us, no, you're fine, just deal with it. Because you might be in the right position, but we aren't. And like, it would just be simpler to, instead of telling us to deal with where we're at, like, come over and flip us the right way. And then surprise, we feel better. You flip us over to where our head is facing upward, and suddenly I don't feel bad anymore.
That's the another thing that they mentioned in the documentary, but they like made it sound worse than it was. Like people who transition have a they have a higher rate of suicide than the typical cis people. But
like,
the suicidality, there's I can't imagine what it would be like. But the typical cis person, they have they have a higher rate of like depression and suicide, but it's way further down than pre-transition, which is the point. That's why it's healthcare. You actually, this is something that is a little interesting, and if you don't want to go into it,
no, we're good. I'm down. I'm making another drink, so my awesome. Inhibitions are lessened even more so now.
I should have got you to sign a consent form before you're sober. So there's so you first had feelings that you were gay, right?
Yeah, can I clarify real quick before we get into the intense discussion? I got Doorknob Head in the side chat saying old fashioned from a bottle of blasphemy. It's not. This is whiskey. This is straight whiskey, and we're making Manhattans, and this is vermouth. So they're in bottles, but they went into a shot glass and then are going into the glass. So okay, there we go. Side rant over.
Andrew, I see your question. We'll ask it at the end for sure, because it's a great question. So yeah, you originally started and you thought you were gay, right? But now, like, you're a man, so it's like, are you straight? Is that like how? Like, are you still like you're attracted to ladies, right? Is that?
I'm bi.
Oh, so you're bi. Oh, you see.
Well, I wasn't always bi. It's funny because for me, I was only attracted to women until I started testosterone, and now I'm attracted to men. So it's funny that people will say that gay people are a result of hormone imbalance, and that I just wasn't into men because of whatever. Like, well, actually, the more masculine I've become, the more attracted to men I've become. So I've just been destined to be gay this whole time. I don't know. Like, no matter what side I'm on, I'm gay.
Well, I've often said, like, I'm bisexual. You get the best of both worlds. You can check out everybody in the shopping center, which should be fun. So, have you noticed? Like, I've got no filter. So, if you don't want to answer any of these, just say, okay, I'm not going to answer that. But have you noticed since taking testosterone? Have you gotten more? I have no idea how it affects like your sexual drive. Has your sexual drive increased because of testosterone? Okay. Yeah. True.
It's weird.
True. Interesting. So is it the opposite for like hormone
I've heard for some people, yeah.
Interesting.
I think not for everybody, but for some people it does reduce their libido. And it's interesting because it changes the orgasm too a little bit, which is deeply personal. But so what I've noticed with before testosterone, it's a lot slower and less powerful
of like an orgasm.
Yeah. Then when I started T, it's a lot faster and like more immediately powerful.
Hey, so I like that. I'm gonna start T. Just for the orgasm. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's it's super. It must be like beyond all the trying to get back to, or trying to get to the state where you feel most comfortable in your body and stuff.
Yeah.
Beyond all that, the back kind of the baggage, the emotional highs and lows. It must be missing all that out. Like, it must be weird to be taking certain medications that affect your biology or your affect yourself so much. Like, is it like I've had experience. I'm on antidepressants that affects me a little bit, but can't imagine, all in good ways, by the way, except for a dry mouth for the first 2 weeks. But I can't imagine what it's like to take something that, does it affect you so much? Like, does it,
Oh, it's
like,
great.
yeah,
My well,
everyone should just take tea.
well, no, but I mean, for me,
No.
like my confidence, like even a lot of the physiological effects don't take place for weeks to months to years on tea. But even within the first week, my confidence level improved dramatically. And it
Wow.
was the sense that, like, I now have some physiology that aligns with my psychology. And that's really all it was.
Mm.
And it's powerful. And I think that, like, and I'm not telling people to experiment with hormone therapy, like, because it can do some, like, if you go on it and you don't want to go on it, it can give you
Yeah.
dysphoria. So,
Oh,
like,
of
don't
course.
just
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah.
But you can tell, like, some people, and I don't know why, and there's no good science on why, and I don't even necessarily think we need the science for why, because I think it would further limit people if we just went into, like, why are you trans? But the fact is that some people's psychology works better with an estrogen dominant body, and some
Interesting.
people's brains and their psychology work better with a testosterone dominant body. And I don't think we necessarily need to investigate why, but the fact is I feel better. And I
Yeah.
know people who are trans women who feel way better on estrogen, and I will never understand them. I will absolutely never understand people who want more estrogen in their body because I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah.
But that's instead of me saying that this doesn't work for me, so you can't have it and your identity is not valid. I think for me it further clarifies the fact that I'm in the right place for me and that they're in the right place for them. Like, it's not that estrogen is a terrible thing to have. Some people really enjoy it. Some people do well on it. I'm not one of those people. But
Mm.
if Katie Montgomery, if Phoebe, if Arden, if they benefit from estrogen, I'm happy for them. I'm very
Mm.
happy that they have something that, like, that estrogen isn't going to waste, that somebody benefits from the hormone that made me want to die every day. I'm happy that somebody benefits from it. And that should be the approach
In the
that I
future,
think
there
if
should be like
people.
a swap. There should be like a swap program where you just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I wish.
yeah,
But, like, if the cis community could jump on this and instead of taking somebody else's experience and using that to hate them, like, you
Mm.
can use that experience to further validate yourself and say, yeah, I'm not this person, but that's okay.
Mm.
They're a good person. I'm a good person. I'm happy with who I am. I like where I'm at. And I'm also happy that they're happy with where they're at. Like, you don't have to hate somebody to make yourself feel better. Like, in fact,
Mm.
I felt the most joy from supporting other people in finding out who they are. I felt so happy doing that with them and going on these transition journeys with my friends who might have
Mm.
different transitions from me. So I wonder too, like, and I'm not saying that this is true for everybody who are transphobes, but, like, if you need to take someone else's experience and hate on them in order to validate your own experience, I'm not convinced that you're happy with your own experience.
Mm.
Like, what do you need to change to be happy with yourself? And maybe work on that instead of hating on somebody else. And I'm not saying that like you need to just like buy into whatever somebody's ideas are, because like if someone's happy and anti-vax, like that's something that they shouldn't be, but that's also not based in evidence. We're talking about evidence.
They should go have a long, hard look at themselves.
Yeah. But for trans people, where we know that the evidence is in their favor, the data's in. We know trans people exist. We know that transitioning helps people. Like, instead of taking valid medicine and hating on somebody for receiving care for their own well-being, like, you can focus on your own, and maybe you'll be happier, maybe everybody will be happier, and I don't know, people can be less assholes around each other, and that maybe we'd all be better.
Yeah. I love this is what I love about you, Ben, is because you seem to be able to wrestle with these talking points. I said this to Shannon Q when she was on. I mentioned that I get worried that there are, you get 9 bad faith questions. That's like something, right? I don't know, like what's a stupid question you hear that's bad faith all the time, like I don't know, something, right?
But were you there?
Oh yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that. But like with in regards to transgenderism, or transgender, and they have, and then you have one person who's actually heard these talking points from bad faith actors, who is genuinely asking this question that seems bad faith but isn't. And then they get yelled at, or not yelled at, but they get like attacked because it's not the trans gender person's responsibility to defend themselves wherever they go. But they're like, it's just like, fuck off, essentially. And then as a result, they turn around and the alt-right is there with open arms saying, we told you, those green-haired, feminist, transgender people, like, they're all, come here, we told you they're crazy. And the alt-right is there with open arms. And I think a lot of what you're seeing, a lot of the hate that you're seeing is people being triggered by clips, like online clips of like lefties. And it's the same thing for, like I said alt-right. That's me projecting how I'm a little triggered at the dumb racist alt-right people, but I'm sure there are some people on the right who are good people. So a bit of a joke, but I'm sure there are some people, I think that if you set everyone down in a room and they were talking about things, like, a lot of people would be more agreement than less agreement. But I think everyone is just reacting to each other, and as a result, that's where this hate comes from. It's like misdirection. A lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, I would say. I hope that makes sense.
No, I'm gathering where you're coming from, and this is why we have shows like the Transatlantic Call-In Show, and because we get the majority of people that call into that show are in good faith, and I will always assume that you are in good faith until you prove me wrong. There are certain things that will prove me wrong, in that certain dog whistles, certain dishonest arguments, where you can tell people are trying to make you angry, or people are just trying to argue with you. But for the most part, I assume people are just trying to learn. And so I'll try to approach it very gently from the beginning. And I understand that people don't know all the new information. People don't know these arguments. They're seeing them for the first time, and they don't know how to engage with it. So my usual approach, and even for people who might ask more invasive questions, typically most questions I'm fine answering, depending on the setting. If I'm on a show that is platforming, like, you can ask trans people questions, absolutely. If I'm on a show that is advertising, this is the topic, feel free. Ask your questions. Don't feel bad about it. Like, be tactful in terms of, like, maybe don't go to my DMs and DM me very specific questions. Maybe don't walk up to me on the street and ask me very specific questions, because I have boundaries for where I answer certain questions. But for the most part, even if somebody oversteps a boundary, that wasn't clearly communicated to them before. I'm going to assume that they just didn't know. And my usual approach is, hey, I'm okay answering this question for you, but maybe in the future, some other people might be offended by this question. So I would recommend that you ask for consent first, or that you direct your question to this platform or something. Like I try to be gentle in recommending, like, number one, a good source of information that it will be happy to answer the question. And then also clarifying that, hey, this question might not be appropriate for everybody. So just be careful that, because somebody else might not want to talk about something more personal or their coming out story. Not everybody wants to mention that. So and I don't think that everyone that is asking for these questions means them harm. But just trying to clarify, like, I know you mean well. I know you just want information. I'm happy to talk to. Here's some other names of people that might also be happy to answer. Here's the email address or link where you can send your questions. And then if you want to know more, just be careful in entering conversations with other people. This is how it might be read. And hopefully it's just a learning experience from there. So I know, it's some people might be taken aback by any kind of feedback. I know some people are very sensitive to feedback, but I don't mean it in a harsh way at all. And I hope that it doesn't come across that way. Unless, of course, if I can tell you are using a dishonest argument to make me angry, then like you had said, if someone starts being dishonest with you, all bets are off. Like, we're gonna start, we're gonna throw down.
Yeah.
And usually that's on live call-in shows where I see that, or it's on Twitter. So those platforms, all bets are off. But for the most part, people have been good about it, and I'm not going to slam somebody into the ground when they just wanted clarification. I don't think that that's the right move for anybody. I think if any trans person or what, they have full right to say that they don't want to answer a question, and I fully respect their boundaries. But that's a case where on a day where I don't want to answer a question, I would probably just say, hey, I'm not in a good space to answer this. I don't really want to do this on this platform. Here's where you can direct your question to. But
I can't imagine like every second day someone's asking about like my genitals or like something like it. I can't even fathom or like I just can't. I can't fathom like having my kind of existence questioned that much, like all the time, like my identity. It must be tiring, and that's why it's good that you put up like boundaries. Like, I'm not going to talk about this to some random person on my DMs or to down the street or something. But I did want to ask you, have you had a moment where you just felt like baller in your own body, where like maybe you went to the beach, you took your shirt off and you were just like, yes, or like maybe, I don't know, like, or like you just felt like, yes, I am in the body that I want to be in? Or are you still working your way there? Or like, what, are you looking forward to that experience? Like, where are you?
I'm working my way slowly but surely, but my muscle mass has increased dramatically since I started, and a lot of it has been passive. But something that was big for me is that there's a lot of rhetoric, especially around trans people in sports, which that's a whole separate topic. But a lot of the rhetoric behind trans men is that anyone assigned female will never be able to match somebody who's born male. That's the rhetoric. And it's inherently misogynistic, because that's not true. There's overlap with anybody. There are women that will beat men at whatever sport. It's true. People are individuals. And so training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I started in 2016. So I was presenting female, totally like pre-transition, didn't even know I was trans, competed in women's divisions. And recently I started training again in jiu-jitsu which I mean, a lot of my time off has been related to med school and not necessarily to the fact that I'm trans. But I went back recently, and at this new gym, nobody knows that I'm trans. Nobody. So it's been great to just be like, hey, I'm entering this. Nobody's misogynistic to me. It's just they see me as a dude with experience. That's it. And I get on the mat with somebody probably double my size for some first to score points. And it was great. Like I didn't wreck him by any means. We're the same skill level, but with a size difference, like I held my own with this guy on the mat. Like, and he's double my size. And that's a trend you see in all of jiu-jitsu, where the smaller you are, generally it takes longer to learn because you're constantly up against big people that just smash you for no reason. But your technique gets solid because you're constantly against people that are bigger than you, stronger than you, better than you, that you learn how to do it well. And so nobody knew that I had only competed in female divisions. Nobody cared, but I held my own against this guy double my size because my technique was there and my strategy was there and my physicality was there. Like I was doing it. So that was something that was very affirming to me, that like my past doesn't define who I am. Like I can do things just as well as any other man can. So I think that's my best example so far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I don't know, like I haven't looked too much into the trans sports issue, to be honest, mainly because I don't care about sports myself. But one thing that I did remember, I used to make video games. I used to love making video games. I had a YouTube channel where I made video games, and I'll teach people how to make video games. And one thing that I learned from a talk was, it was essentially that sports are stupid because they're based on genetics at the highest levels, right? Like there's no way I can ever be a pro basketball player. I'm just not tall enough. There's nothing I could do to fix that. There's nothing I could do to change that. It's like at the top level, my genetics cap me. And the same with like, I can never be a rock climber. I'm short, like I don't have a good reach. I'm short and I'm heavy, So, I mean, the heaviness I could change, but the low reach I couldn't change. So when it comes to like the top fields of sports, like it's kind of like this masturbatory genetics game anyway. It's like, what's the best, like it's almost like, finding people that can reach that upper potential, the Olympic potential, and then giving them the correct training. So it's like, to me, it's all a bit of a masturbatory, like taking it too seriously.
And the you have some financial advantage in there too, because if you have somebody who can spend their entire day training their sport instead of having to work a job, that adds more to it. And like, there's so many variables to what makes a good athlete in whatever sport, that it's never going to be fair. It never was fair. So to claim that like you needed it to be fair for everybody across the board, no, you didn't. So it's a fallacious argument from the get-go.
It's not the look, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems as though if a biological man goes through puberty, they probably have a bigger skeletal structure and muscle mass and things like that. Even if they do start taking hormones and transition, they might be at a slight advantage or something.
The data shows that it's because it's based on fat-free lean mass.
Okay.
Is what the studies are showing. And so if you took people of the same height and weight and muscle mass, like they're gonna perform equally. So like the biggest issue is people get freaked out. People get freaked out about but we can't have Brock Lesnar in the ring with Misha Tate. Well, they're two completely different body sizes. They would never be in the same weight class. But take wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or boxing or whatever. You take a cis woman who's 135 pounds, and you take a cis man at 135 pounds, which is small for a lot of cis men. But the point is, when you normalize for size, that's a fair match.
So so what you're saying is, if we had better ways, or like if we measured things more precisely and put people together based on muscle mass, it would be a fairer.
Well, it's sport dependent. Like if you
Yeah.
can take the data that says these factors make for different skill in the sport, then maybe you
Yeah.
make categories based on that characteristic. Like even if you just made it skill categories or size categories, height categories, it's going to
Mm.
be more localized than that. And sure, you might have more cis women on the lower weight class spectrum, but that's fine. Like, and we see this in jujitsu. Children in jujitsu compete co-ed. Like, it's
What
not
is?
until they hit puberty. Puberty is when they start gendering jujitsu.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
So yeah. So for, if you say that, that makes a lot of sense. But I guess my point is
mhm,
that is arbitrary, and so is all the other categories in sport. It's essentially
yeah,
not categories. I just what I don't like about sports is this masquerading of like, this person put in the work and and they train. So okay, sure, of course you did. Like it's like somebody takes steroids and then gets huge. It's like,
yeah,
of course, like when you're on steroids, you train harder than you've ever trained in your life. I'm sure it's like one of the most brutal things that you've ever put your body through, but you still got that big because of the steroids. The steroids still played a major part in that
yeah.
whole endeavor. So it's like your genetics play a huge part in the upper levels of like your upbringing, where you grow up, your genetics. Like it's all. I wish, but once again, and I'm rambling a little bit. Sorry. Once again, it's similar to what you were saying before about how people want to take like a simplistic approach to gender, and I
Yeah.
think people do the same thing with sports. It's just like,
Mhm.
men should be with men and women should be with women. It's like,
But
like,
why? What's your
yeah,
reason?
yeah, exactly. Like to me it's just arbitrary. And that's to me, I've been quoted in saying my greatest fear in life is that my children will be into sports. And that's a bit of a joke, but yeah, I'm not a huge sports person, obviously. But I do enjoy kicking a ball around or something, but
Well,
not
and
hugely.
something like along this, like with trans men, um, like it's this belief that women or anyone assigned female is inherently worse. And I've
Mm,
seen this argument before, is that trans men will never beat cis men because they're physiologically inferior, which a lot of these arguments fail to address. Like, sure, there is the genetic difference in elite athletes versus a casual athlete. Like there are
mm,
genetics that come into play, whether you are a man, a woman, whatever. Like, again, I dare any cis man that is not an Olympian to get in the pool with Katie Ledecky and try to beat her time. Like, good luck. Like, you being a man is not going to make you beat Katie Ledecky in swimming. So
maybe no
her
jet
being
ski.
a woman is not what is inferior about her.
Mm,
So it's an argument meant to suppress people
mm,
that they deem to be female. And they're eliminating the factors of training and strategy and timing and preparation and all that which play into your performance. Like if you take two athletes of whatever variety and they're both equal skill level, equal size, equal strength, everything else is equal, but one person had a bad day and one person had a good day, the person with a good day is probably going to win. And it's not because of some physiological advantage, but somebody had a good day. Their timing was good. Like there's
but
a reason why you don't do one fight and then say, I'm forever better than you. You have to fight
yeah,
multiple times because your first fight might not be indicative of every other fight after that. And like people don't seem to process that there is no inherent better. There is
yeah.
this time or other times, and there are multiple factors that play into somebody's winning of a tournament.
So, yeah, I agree. That makes sense. But so, would you agree though? I don't know. I'm not making any
Mhm,
affirmative statements here. I'm just asking. It is so. Would you say though, like if we match for muscle mass,
mhm,
that's all good, but
mhm.
for men, for biological men to get up to that muscle mass is much easier than for a biological
Yeah,
female. Would that be
yeah,
accurate?
But then
Okay.
you apply that rhetoric to sports that are not related to the muscle mass necessarily. So like people could say, well, for weightlifting, this is an advantage. And yeah, like I agree, testosterone does give you some advantage for lean muscle mass.
Mhm.
But then to say you are superior in this one aspect of physiology, therefore skeet shooting should be gendered because of muscle mass. You can't extrapolate those 2 points and other things. People completely disregard other physiological advantages. Like people see muscle mass as being a strength, which it is, but disregard anything that could be viewed as feminine from being an advantage. So things like
Yeah.
flexibility or agility, or even there are studies showing that women or like cis women and people assigned female have advantages in endurance sports, largely due to their fat mass, because we know that endurance sports rely on the citric acid cycle and beta oxidation of lipids. So people that are able to concentrate lipids that are available for metabolism by muscle, and the larger concentration of type 2 muscle fibers are going to have advantage in endurance sports. So
Interesting.
cis women are actually at an advantage in endurance sports and in things like gymnastics, in things with some more agility and flexibility, but those aren't seen as strengths for whatever reason. And I think it's misogyny. It's people view flexibility as feminine, and so it's not
So
desirable.
so I don't know this, but is the best are the best gymnasts in the world, are they female, or and the best endurance athletes, or
Well, I can't say that the best, like in general, but
is there like a trend?
there's an
Is what
advantage.
oh wow.
There are studies done for endurance athletes and women versus men, and specifically related to fat mass. And that is what we're seeing. And I can't say for sure that this is a causal thing, because
Hmm.
the research is still being done. But that's what we're seeing. So it's and something that saying that one body type is ideal for every sport is fallacious, because it's not true. There are
Hmm.
sports that favor different body types. And so that's where like the trans people in sports conversation needs to be had at a sport level with regard to their policies. So I'm not
Interesting.
saying that there needs to be a standardized everything. And again, and that also needs to happen at the elite level versus like school level. If you have children, like if your 10-year-old kid is on a co-ed soccer team, like why do we need to stop trans people from playing 5th grade soccer? That's a bit ridiculous to like just let the kids play. At the elite level, it should be a sport by sport basis on what is acceptable, but you also have to again consider that cis people might fall outside of that bracket. So if let's say if you set a requirement, your estrogen levels or your testosterone levels must be within these parameters, you have to then disqualify cis women whose testosterone falls outside of that range. And we're seeing that with Olympic athletes. Even we're seeing people that people are wanting to have disqualified for high T levels in cis women. So where are you willing to draw the line? If you're going to have these
Yeah.
definite boundaries, where's the line drawn, and who are you excluding? Because you're going to exclude people.
That's interesting. So it's like, yeah, so it's like you're going to exclude people regardless. So it's like it almost gets like philosophical. Like, who do you like? Why did you choose to exclude this group, not this group? Like, do we want an equal society? Do we want a non-equal society? Do we want to produce? It's interesting. It's an interesting conversation. It'd be interesting to look more into this and to have another conversation about it, because
Yeah.
obviously I just my go-to is sports is stupid, don't take it so seriously, but that's wrong because sports aren't stupid, but obviously I'm just not a huge sport fan.
It's just a nuanced conversation, and we
Yeah.
have to take this conversation to a nuanced level and not just black and white, men or women.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So we're actually like, we've been talking for ages, and I love
I know
that
we've been having
because,
fun.
yeah, I've been enjoying it. But we could go for hours more because I got so many other questions. But I want to. I think maybe what we'll do. I don't know if you'll come back on, but if you
This is
do,
I will be happy to come back on. Like if this is you
awesome.
inviting me back on, just hit me up.
Well, awesome. Yeah, like we'll have to have a round two because
Yeah.
there's so much other stuff we could go into, and we just seem to. I find it interesting talking to you. It's we can bounce off each other really well. But
Yeah.
I wanted to do two more things before we finish up. I've got a list that is just I'm going to call myth or fact, and it's about medicine and pseudoscience.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we can jump into some questions.
Yeah.
So myth or fact. So what I'll do is I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say something, and you just tell me if it's myth or fact, or how mythical or how fact it is. Most of these are topics from videos that I haven't had a chance to watch yet on your channel. So if people, and this actually would be a good time to mention that everyone should go subscribe to Student Dr. Ben. For sure. You produced, I don't know why it's doing that. You produced some of this amazing content on like medical myths. You had a really big episode on vitamin C. I thought that was
if you go to the lives, you'll be able to see the more of those content. My lecture videos are a bit more intense with the science, and then the medical myths is a bit more lighthearted usually in terms of the content.
Is fentanyl killing our cops? Functional medicine, the truth about cannabis, featuring secular rarity, routine infant circumcision, featuring Nate. Like, it's just like, I love that you take these like, why did God create cancer, featuring Jenna? Oh, I love Jenna. Jenna is one of my favorite people on the internet.
They're all great people. I'll have to get you on, and since you just invited me on to your show live, I'm happy to extend an invite to you as well. And I'm happy to move to an Australian friendly time. I've had one other Australian on my show before. Almost a Doctor has been on before, and I woke up early for that show. So I'm happy to wake up early for an Australian friendly show.
I'm sure we'll work something out. I don't mind doing it at whatever crazy hour. But yeah, I'd love to come on your show and we can talk about, I'm sure we can find something that's tangential.
Oh yeah, you picked the topic. Let's go.
Well, I am a huge advocate for antidepressants, which is interesting because you don't hear a lot of people who are like that. Not a huge advocate. I just like to tell my story in that they worked very well for me, like very well for my OCD. But you never hear that story. You always hear the horrible story. Anyway, yeah, I'd love to come on your show. We can talk about stuff. We also, just to mention, we have a couple of cool episodes coming up on Deep Drinks. We have Russell Manser, who was in jail for 23 years. Robbed banks and things like that, and now he's reformed, and he's helping criminals get reformed, and it's going to be a really interesting story. Big criminal in Australia back a few years ago. We've actually got footage of him robbing banks, which is crazy. But he's a really cool guy, and we're going to have a virgin because he's sober now. We're going to have virgin mojitos, I think they are.
Oh, nice.
And then we have Escaping the Amish Cult.
Is that Mountain Dew Zero?
Yeah. So apparently when he left the Amish cult, he tried Mountain Dew for the first time and he just loved it. So he's like a really strong Christian now, but he's like standing back against the Amish cult. And there's things like murder, all incest, crazy, just crazy child abuse, like all the stuff he talks about. And then we're going to end the year, and I don't know if this will become a yearly tradition, but the Derek Knows Everything Christmas special, because Derek interviews so many people, friend of the show, and we're going to ask him everything he knows about everything to do with probably biblical scholarship. So that'll be
I think Derek showed up in the side chat earlier.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I saw that.
Nice.
And if people like to listen to Deep Drinks, they can listen to it on the way to work. Just search Deep Drinks on podcasting platforms. But let's just get the banner back. And you can see, I don't know what's going on here. Sorry. The banner here, you can see once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're doing a charity stream, which would be cool. And coming next year, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this, but I think I'm going to mention it now. We're going to be having a Deep Drinks panels. So
Ooh.
not just the podcast. So we're going to have one hopefully about Iran. I'm talking to some journalists at the moment to talk about that. We're going to have Nuria Khan on, holy humanist, and a few other people who are protesting the stuff that's happening in Iran and women's rights. So that'll be good. I want to do one on purity culture. I got a lot of really cool ideas to come up and have a panel of guests on. So yeah, that's cool things happen to Deep Drinks. You want to subscribe and you want to go subscribe to Student Dr. Ben. But let's do myth or fact, Ben.
Let's do it.
Okay, vitamin C. Will it help you when you have a cold?
Myth.
Is that a full myth? Is that like
it's there's some mixed data on that it might reduce symptoms, but this is a correlation and not really evidence of causation. If you want to consume vitamin C when you have a cold, it's probably not going to hurt you. It'll be expensive pee. It might give you kidney stones in high doses. So just watch for that. But it's mostly myth.
Okay. Will vitamin C help you beat cancer?
That's 100% myth.
Okay. I used to think that I used to watch like a lot of those like documentaries about the pharmaceutical industry and how natural medicine, and I got really hooked into it at one time. But then I recently found out that like with some cancers, you don't want to boost your immune system because it actually helps the cancer cells grow because it gives them. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know how true that is either, but it's like a typical example of like what you're told is exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no evidence at this time that suggests that vitamin C cures cancer.
So. Okay, detoxing diets.
That's a myth.
Okay.
You don't need that because your liver and your kidneys and your lungs will do that for you. You don't need a detox.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I can see so many people getting angry in the comments. I'm not in the live comments, but I can see.
Go watch my channel. They can watch it.
Exactly. And a lot of these videos are subjects in like a full hour-long live episode where you go through the studies. Is gluten bad for you?
If you don't have celiacs, no.
Okay. Homeopathy.
Absolute bunk. This is a myth. Homeopathy is a myth. There's no way to justify homeopathy being valid.
What if it's magic? You're forgetting about magic, Ben.
It's not. Homeopathy is absolute myth.
Is it safe to drink your pee? Now, I wasn't going to write this one down, but I saw this.
It's not safe.
It's not. Bear Grylls says it's okay.
Yeah, the problem is, and I go through in the whole video, you have to watch it, but I go through renal physiology, and like the first couple times you drink your pee, it might not be too problematic, but the more concentrated it gets over time, the more ammonia you build up, and this is an issue. And I go into the whole like concentration and gradients of ammonia in the kidney and how that can get disrupted. So it's not a good idea. It's not.
What about, okay, this is gonna get weird. What about like people who have like water sports fetishes where they like to pee on each other? Is that safe or is that not safe?
It's safe. Like, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, it's just not, don't drink the pee and then pee it out and then drink it again and then pee it out and drink it again, because that's where the problem is that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, interesting. I could ask you a bunch of other sex questions, but I'll leave that. Candida diet.
Bullshit. It's bullshit. Okay.
I grew up with this one. That was one I grew up with. Yeah, really? Hugely. Yeah, and
yeah.
You know, there's a machine that like you touch, and then it puts certain things. They put certain things on this machine, and it measures your electrical things.
I want to talk about that because I've not heard of that before. But I want to talk about that on Medical Myth. But apparently, Candida is an opportunistic pathogen. People can grow it, and it's usually grown in people who are immunocompromised anyway. So HIV patients, cancer patients, are more prone to Candida infections, or people with vaginal yeast infections caused by a reduction of bacteria in the area. So it's an overgrowth of a pathogen that's already there. So most people do not have a Candida overgrowth. And the way that the Candida diet instructs, they basically say that all sugar grows Candida. It's true, but not true in that, yes, Candida likes sugar, but in the amounts that you're eating on a regular day-to-day basis, if you are not immunocompromised, you're really not at high risk for Candida overgrowth in your intestines.
Okay, interesting. This I'll leave this one for the end. Magnetic therapy.
Absolute bullshit. Your blood cannot be controlled by magnets. It's not true.
What about if you got the COVID vaccine? I've heard that makes people magnetic.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And you watch the episode, because the amount of magnetism that they are claiming. So what they did, instead of actually calculating out the amount of magnetism for the bracelet, they took each individual magnet and then added them together and said that the sum of the magnetism was the amount of magnetism you're getting, which was equal to 11 MRI machines, which is not true. You are not walking around with 11 MRI machines on your wrist because you would not be able to pull yourself off of a car. It's false.
Okay. This is a big one. I have a friend of a friend who had cancer and went through Dr. Simoncini's bicarb soda cancer treatment, and the cancer disappeared. This is the cancer is a fungus.
No. Cancer is your own cells that have mutated, and people that have a cancer remit. Like, we know that spontaneous remission is possible, and we don't always know why, because this is a fairly new field of study, but sometimes cancer goes away and we don't have a good answer for it. And it's not the right answer to chalk it up to weird things like cancer's a fungus or this apple cider vinegar diet or cannabis or whatever have you. The answer is it went away, and it's great that it did. We might not know why. So that's the most honest answer I can give on that.
There's a documentary called by Vice called Stoned Kids, and it was about Brave Michaela, whose parents were giving her she was had cancer, I think. I don't know if she was terminal, but she had cancer, and her parents were giving her mass amounts of THC, and she's still alive like 10 years later. Now, whether or not it was the THC or something else, or was the placebo effect, or spontaneous remission, like we did studies to find that, obviously. But it is interesting that it is interesting.
Yeah, and there are uses for cannabis in treatment of cancer, particularly with as an anti-nausea medication. We do use it to treat nausea in cancer therapy. But if somebody is terminal, like, I don't care what terminal cancer you have. If you're terminal, you should be able to do whatever drugs you want, because if you're going to go out anyway, why do we need to restrict your fun for the last bit of your life? Like, I
don't know who they were. They're a distant relative. I'm pretty sure it was like an auntie or like a second auntie or a great auntie or something. They lived it was like 50 years ago or something, and they had terminal cancer, and they lived in like the UK, I think it was, and they were going to die. So they actually moved them to, I think, the Netherlands, where all drugs were legal at the time, or somewhere in Europe where all drugs were legal. And they gave them heroin for the last like part of their life, and they weren't like knocked out of their head. They just had enough that they were happy and laughing and having a great time for the last part of their life. It didn't matter that they were going to get addicted; they were going to die, and they lived the last part of their life in pure bliss and like laughing with the family and having a great time.
Right. I don't see why we couldn't have like a form that you sign that says, hey, I consent to this at the end of my life. Like, you could easily get around some legal ramifications by yeah, I have an advance directive that says if I am not able to live past, if my life expectancy is less than blank, I want to smoke meth and inject some heroin and drink a lot. Like,
Yeah.
that should be your right to choose. I should your long-term health is not relevant at that point because you're already predicted to die within 6 months, like if you're hospice. So I don't see the problem in letting somebody enjoy the end of their life. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. But again, like, it's a personal consent thing. Like, you don't have to consent to that. If you say, I don't want to do that, you don't have to.
You don't have to, yeah.
But
It's
but
like,
for the people who want to, I don't see the issue here.
it's like it's the same thing. It's like, hey, like, just because like trans people exist, you don't have to transition yourself, or just because gay marriage is a thing doesn't mean you have to marry a man or marry a woman. Like, it's like you can.
Like, if I'm gonna die anyway, I want to be happy. Let me die happy, okay?
Yeah. So jumping onto some Q&A questions. Aunt Jo had a great question before.
Yeah.
Question for Ben. How do you respond to people who say, yeah, but those are anomalies when presented with the nuances of sex and biology?
Yeah. So here's my response is that eliminating people from the equation who don't fit your binary for the sake of keeping the binary is dishonest, in that like, you can think of any number of exceptions. Like, let's say people who have a uterus, like people who are cis women who have a uterus. They're obviously exceptions in that some people get a hysterectomy for whatever reason and they cannot have children, or people who get a tubal ligation, or they tie their tubes, they cannot get pregnant. So to say that women can get pregnant is false, in that not all women can get pregnant because of any number of reasons. So while it's an exception, it does not disqualify somebody from being included in the group. So it's dishonest when people say a woman, or let's say a man's easier to use for this. A man is somebody who has a penis. So then if you're using that as your definition, then you have to say that someone who does not have a penis, let's say they had penile cancer and had to get it removed, that they are no longer a man because they had that removed. So while there are exceptions to the trend, it does not exclude people from being included in that category. So that's my response. Like, and if someone is going to engage with you in a discussion about this, that you bring that in. Like, if you say, what makes you a man? And someone says, my penis makes me a man. Okay, so if you went to war and your penis was blown off by a bomb for whatever unfortunate circumstance, are you no longer a man? And more often than not, they would say, no, I'm still a man. This thing just happened to me. And I would agree with them. So you take them further down that route, and you get to a point where the anatomy does not determine the gender identity. And so that's, even no matter how far you go down that pathway, you don't eliminate that gender identity. And so that's the point that we get to. So I definitely recommend, if you engage on this topic, take a straight epistemology approach, and like, because people aren't receptive to just blanket, yeah, well, exceptions are included, because they might not listen to you, but get them to think that they made the connection, and you might win. Yeah.
Great answer. What's the purpose? Sorry. Do you have to go? What's the process of transitioning? And do people have a different place where they? I don't know where I didn't finish that, but what's the process of transitioning? Like, say if you want to start transitioning, what's the process?
So I think I know where the question was going, and where's the end point for different people is kind of where I think that they're going.
Oh,
So I'll
yeah,
answer
yeah,
all
yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
So it's different for everybody. And that's what's very great, because you get to choose what happens to your own body. And I stand by everyone's right to choose what happens to their own body. So I'm a binary trans man. And so my journey has been very typical for what a lot of other trans men go through, in that I came out to myself first. I learned that I might be trans, and then from there I socially transitioned. So this is a period where no medical intervention is happening at all. And this is a completely 100% reversible process. I'm trying out new pronouns. I'm trying out new hairstyle, clothing style, maybe a new name, trying different things out. And then if I don't like it, I can go back and say, hey, this didn't work for me, and then switch. So my first step was social transition. And then once I got comfortable with social transition, I sought out medical transition. And I did for myself get a psychotherapist to make sure that I had appropriate mental health care while I was going through it, because I knew it was going to be a journey for figuring out who I was, and I wanted somebody to talk to while I went through that, whatever happened. So I did get a therapist. They were not necessary for me to get hormone therapy, but I personally wanted them there just in case I had certain things I wanted to process with them. And so then I started medical transition. I went on hormones, and it gradually increases. So you don't get a full dose right away. You start off a very small dose, and then you see how it goes for the first month, or even the first 3 months, because you don't really see a whole lot of level changes within the first 3 months. So you kind of go through 3 months on a low dose. You reevaluate with your provider and say, hey, I like this, or I didn't like this. And then you adjust from there. I liked it, so I increased my dosage. And so I follow up with them every 3 months to evaluate where I'm at and to see if my levels are appropriate for a cis man of my age group. And the next step for me is I'm scheduled to get top surgery sometime in April. And in fact, like, this is another shill, but I have a fundraiser that I'm doing for my top surgery. If anyone wants to contribute to it, you can find it on my Twitter. It's the pinned tweet there. But for me, it's
Absolutely. I'm gonna
yeah,
post that.
yeah. Kind of the typical route is social transition followed by hormones, and then top surgery, and then bottom surgery. At least for a trans man. I know for trans women, it might be a little bit different in that they have more surgeries that they often go through. Like, they have facial feminization surgery, which trans men don't have to go through. So many trans women that go through FFS might do that before they go through top surgery, or they might do it after. That's dependent on who they are as a person. But for a binary person, that's kind of the trend that we're going to follow. For someone who's non-binary, or for anyone that just doesn't want to follow the same pathway, you can undergo any of these procedures in whatever order you want. And especially as an adult over 18, you can consent to whatever procedures you want or don't want. So you talk to your provider, and there's somebody else in the community. I'm not going to name names for privacy purposes, but other people who have undergone bottom surgery before top surgery. And that's fine. Like, and if that's something that you want to do as an adult, you can make that decision. If you want to undergo top surgery before you have hormones, that's also fine. It's a matter of what is priority for you. And some people who are non-binary might never go through bottom surgery, or might never go through top surgery. Same thing with even binary trans men or binary trans women might never do bottom surgery because it's risky, and you face some more complications potentially with it. It's also very expensive. So there might be multiple reasons why someone might not choose to go through a particular therapy. and that's up to you. So my
I,
approach is like, there's a general trend of what the majority chooses, but I will happily support anybody in whatever is best for them and what they consent to.
Awesome. Okay. I had a friend who lived in Thailand, and they were like a strong Christian at the time. They were over there doing mission work and helping like girls in sex slavery and things like that. That fun fact, she's one of my best friends, and she's now married to a lady, and not a Christian. So she was the first gay wedding I ever went to. I went out and bought the gayest socks I could possibly find to wear underneath my my shoes. But she was saying that when she was over there, she was talking to her partner, and who was Thai, and she was asking like, "Hey, this person's clearly not passing as a lady, like a lady boy was there. Why? Like it's obvious they could just put in a little bit more effort, and they could then look like a lady, but then they don't." And because obviously there are a lot of lady boys. I don't know if that's the same, but there are a lot of lady boys in Thailand. And her partner said to her, "Well, that's as far as that person needs to go to make themselves happy. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're passing or not. They just needed to like go a certain. They had to go a certain amount of way down the line of transitioning, I guess, or appearing that way to feel happy, and that's what they did. And that totally changed my friend's perspective. They're like, "Oh, okay, that's why you might see someone and they're transgender, but they might not be perfectly like I'll say quote unquote convincing, right? Without trying to sound disrespectful. But it's just because it's a personal thing. That's how far they want to go. And when she told me that made so much more sense to me. It's like it's not trying to trick the world. It's a personal, this is how I want to look. This is how I want to be perceived by society. And that made things a lot easier for me to understand.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's based on you and your happiness. And some people, I know plenty of people who don't want to do every surgery and they're happy. And that's totally valid. Like, you don't need to put your body through what you don't want to put your body through. And I stand for that in terms of being pro-choice. You should have the final say of whatever goes on in your body. And that goes for trans people too. And I will support whatever decision you think you want to make about that. So.
Okay. Does every trans person start with gender dysphoria? Is that like an innate thing in transgender?
Not everybody does. So it's interesting. There's a certain camp of trans people that will say that you require gender dysphoria to be seen as trans. And I'm not in that camp. I know people who are trans and who have not experienced dysphoria, but they experience euphoria with a certain gender identity and gender expression.
Okay.
So some people
Interesting.
say, I have neutral feelings towards being a woman, but I have very happy feelings being a man. And so they might not hate being a woman, but they're not happy there. And they might say, I'm happier with this presentation and with this identity. And so not everybody's journey is the same. I have dysphoria, but not everybody does. And I will happily stand by anybody that says that they are trans, whether or not they have dysphoria, because that's for them to decide.
Yeah. One of the things, I don't know if now I'm just drunk and remembering parts of the documentary, but and if this is related at all, but one of the things in the documentary was they asked that person, can you tell what a cat is? Or, like there's that book that he wrote us about being a moose or something. It's like how many documented cases do we have of people like killing themselves over identifying as a moose? Like this isn't researched. This isn't researched. This isn't even taken seriously. This isn't a thing. But how many people do we have who kill themselves because, or at least are extremely depressed or are struggling mentally because they don't fit the gender that they're in? This is well documented, and this is well studied, and there has been like transitioning shows that there was a fact. You know what? I would even go as far as to say if there was like a huge majority of people, like a huge group of people who did identify as moose or mooses or meese or whatever, moose, and we found that giving them like, you know, fur implants and things made them happier, then go for it. I don't care, like whatever. But that's not what's happening, and that's
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
I have to hold myself back from ranting when I get this drunk. What advice would you give to someone who what advice would you give to someone as someone who is transitioning to someone who's thinking about transitioning?
Yeah, it's difficult to really work in your head whether or not you want to transition. For someone, if you've already reached the point to say, I want to, but insert whatever factor here, whether it be, oftentimes it's a social factor of I want to transition, but I am scared of what being trans will do to me. And that's something that I dealt with was I want to transition, but I am scared of being seen as trans. I'm scared if it goes in a way that I don't want it to go. I'm scared of harassment. I'm scared of being ostracized from my family. And those are reasonable fears. My thought is if you already know that you'd be happier doing this, then do it. And in fact, with social transition, you can always go back. You are not ever committed to socially transitioning one way or another. And if you want to say, hey, I want to try out some they them pronouns or she her pronouns or he him pronouns, go for it. And if you have friends that are good friends, they will not hate you if you decide later to say, hey, I don't like these pronouns, can we go back to what I used before? Like if you have real friends, they're not going to hate you for trying something to better yourself. So you
It's
can
actually
social transition. Yeah, go for it.
It's actually funny. So I've gotten into the habit of using they them for everyone, right? Like or even when I've got a gaming channel, and you know no one subscribes and no one cares and no one watches, but when I play it, I'll say like, I'll catch myself saying, all right boys, we're gonna, and then I'll be like, and then I'll change to like, all right folks, because I want to be inclusive, because like, you know, especially in the gaming in part of the world, women that like just shit on. So I'm trying to like be more inclusive there. But what's funny in the introduction, I had a bunch of like theys and thems in the introduction when I was introducing you, and I actually had to go back. I was like, no, and I changed it to he and him and his in the introduction, because I was like, this is funny. This is like the opposite case of where I try and be inclusive all the time, but I was like, no, like the whole point of this is that Ben is a he him. Like, so I actually went back and changed. So it's funny how like I caught myself trying to be inclusive, but it would have come across as maybe uninclusive or something. So it's fun.
Well, and yeah, for people who like if you do social transition, and I'm aware that some people might not be able to do a lot of social transition before they do medical because it might be dangerous to only social transition. So there's a myth that is perpetuated
as well.
Well, there's a myth that's perpetuated by a lot of transphobes where you will instantly have physiological changes with HRT, which is false. It takes weeks to months to get any kind of result from HRT, and especially estrogen takes longer on average for physical changes than testosterone does. And I'm a year and a half on T, and my voice has changed, my muscle mass has changed, but there's still like I don't have facial hair. I can't grow a lot of facial hair. That typically comes in like between 2 and 4 years on T. So the lie that
do you think you're gonna grow a beard?
My family doesn't grow a whole lot, but they can grow mustaches. So this is growing in more than this is, but we'll see what happens.
But do you think what I'm saying is, do you think you're gonna rock it? Like, do you think you're gonna like let it?
I hope it happens. If it happens, I'm growing it. But
yeah.
I mean, until I go active duty military in July, in which case I will have to shave every week. But but like if you honestly think to yourself that you want to do hormone therapy, you can do it without necessarily committing to long-term changes, in that, like, I was afraid of this when I first started, that in the first week I was going to get irreversible changes, and it's not true. So it took a while for me to get any kind of results from it, apart from the mental confidence boost, which was great. That was immediate. But if you want to try hormones, it's pretty risk-free for a good period of time. So if you want, let's say you're assigned male and you want to try estrogen, you could do estrogen for a few weeks and see how it makes you feel emotionally before you get any kind of physical changes. So you can decide for yourself there. You're not condemning yourself to irreversible changes by doing HRT. So if you really are considering it, I would say go for it. And over the first 2 to 3 weeks, if you don't like what you're getting, even over the first week, if you don't like how you feel on it, you can stop it. No one's going to make you do it longer than you want to. So that's my recommendation. If you want to try it, then try it and know that it's temporary if you want to stop at any time. Once you get longer, like for trans guys, voice changes start happening at the earliest about a month, and it's a very minimal. The farther you go, the more irreversible the changes are to your voice. So know that if you want to try it, maybe a few weeks versus a few months for reversible changes, but try it, and then you can always stop.
Okay. To be honest, the explosive orgasm thing we said before makes me want to try tea.
Well, and so,
I'm
I
just
mean,
kidding.
and for cis guys, like a lot of cis guys have low T levels.
Yeah,
So
I've actually
you
heard
have,
that it's like
yeah, it's common.
40%.
It's
After
very
40,
common.
it's like 40%. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's I don't know if I have low T levels, but just
You can always get them measured. Like
the word
anyone
explosive
can.
orgasm just will not get out of my head.
Yeah.
So we didn't talk too much, and maybe we can say this a bit for more of another time. But you did mention, like, you eventually deconstructed your faith. You're no longer a believer in Christianity or in God. So I got two questions that I always ask people on this channel. So what, if anything, would change your mind specifically on the God belief?
On the God belief. It's hard to specifically say what specific thing. But if somebody could prove a causal relation between God and whatever the fuck is going on here on this planet, which there's a lot of things you could, like, literally any causal relation. If you could prove a causal relation and not just a correlation, I would reconsider.
Okay.
But I
okay.
need math for that.
You got to feel it, bro. You got to feel it. That's what.
Yeah, no, I need some math. I need some other. I need you to also exclude. I need to find some way to exclude hallucination from the differentials. So
Yeah,
if you can demonstrate causality and prove that it wasn't a hallucination, which is difficult to do, then you know I'd reconsider.
Okay, and last question is, what is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
Oh God, I don't know. Well, okay. Well, actually, no. Of the religions in the world, like and again, this might be a cop out because I don't believe in deities. I don't believe in any deities.
I know what you're gonna
say. Zen Buddhism is probably the closest to correct.
Everyone says that
because of the lack of God claim. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone says that. Everyone says that. So just wrapping up quickly, I do want to mention that I really thank you for coming on, Deep Drinks Ben. This isn't a safe space for anyone because we have deep conversations. This is the disclaimer I put up. We have deep conversations. I'll talk to people about almost anything, as long as it's done responsibly. So, but I think that I always put the right title on these videos so people have a choice on whether or not to join in these conversations or watch these conversations, because I realize that deep conversations sometimes aren't just like a perfect spot. But what I really appreciate is you coming on anyway and deciding to have this conversation. But what I want to say is that although this place isn't a safe space, and I'll talk to Christians, I'll talk to people who I find morally reprehensible. I want to say personally that I'm an ally. I've got wearing my ally shirt. I'm a ally.
Yeah.
I love my trans people. I love my members of the LGBT community. Got a soft spot in my heart for them, especially because one of my best friends, Colin, first episode of Deep Drinks, spent 45 years closeted. So although this isn't a safe space for everyone, this is where we have deep conversations about all sorts of topics that can be hard for people to listen to. I just wanted to say that my personal perspective is that. And also, I wanted to shout out your fundraiser for your top surgery as well.
I appreciate it a lot.
$2,444 raised of the 10 grand. So, guys, let's push that number up a little bit. For the people watching, it'd be great to see you get to that $10,000 goal. Be awesome to see. So thank you so much, Ben, for coming on Deep Drinks. It's been really cool getting to know you, man. And there is a panel that I'm supposed to be part of. What do you call it? Ben's Bullshit Bible Study.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And we're going through it was super interesting. It's on your channel as well, right? Where we're going through a purity culture book. But what you went through back before you transitioned, so you're coming from the perspective of like what the gender norms came on, like were pushed onto you. So
yeah.
So I'm going to be on that hopefully, if we can line up time. But I've got the book ready to go, and super excited for that. So thank you so much for coming on, Ben. And is there anything else you wanted to say before we leave?
Not really. Thank you everybody for joining us. I know we went like way over time, but
that's totally
hope you
cool.
all appreciated this discussion, and I've had a few drinks, so it's been
awesome. Fun. You got plans for the rest of the night?
No, I'm hanging out. I'm hoping I'll chat with you backstage. But
yeah,
cool.
You should correct me on every wrong thing I said. No. All right, awesome. I'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on Thursday night. Well, it might be Wednesday night for you guys, Wednesday morning or something, for Russell Manser. See you guys.